Perspective. Perspective in art is a method of graphically depicting three-dimensional objects and spatial relationships on a two-dimensional plane. There are two types of perspective used when drawing or painting outdoors: aerial perspective and linear perspective. Aerial perspective, also called atmospheric perspective, is a method of creating the illusion of depth in a painting or drawing by modulating color to simulate changes affected by the atmosphere on the colors of things seen at a distance. In this painting of a landscape, we see an example of aerial perspective. The objects that are closest to us are saturated in color and clearer in terms of detail and definition. As these things move away into the distance, they become less sharp in terms of their detail and more muted in terms of their color. Linear perspective is a system of creating the illusion of depth on a flat surface. In this example, using one-point perspective, all parallel lines, or orthogonals, converge in a single vanishing point on the composition's horizon line. The red lines in this image indicate a series of orthogonal lines converging on a single vanishing point. Horizon line. The horizon line is the line where the sky meets the land or water. The height of the horizon line influences the placement of the vanishing point and is at the viewer's eye level. Vanishing point. The vanishing point is the place where parallel lines appear to meet in the distance. In this example, the parallel lines of the railroad track recede and visually merge to create a single vanishing point on the horizon. The parallel lines of the box that are moving away from us also converge on this vanishing point. Ground plane. The ground plane is the horizontal surface below the horizon and may be land or water. Orthogonal lines. These are lines directed to the vanishing point, such as the parallel lines of the railroad track shown in the example. Orthogonal means right angle. It refers to right angles that are formed by lines, such as a corner of a cube shown in perspective. Vantage point. Not to be confused with the vanishing point, the vantage point is a place from which a scene is viewed. The placement of the horizon line and the vanishing points affect the vantage point. Two-point perspective. Two-point perspective is useful in rendering objects such as boxes, pedestals, chairs, and buildings seen from different angles. In two-point perspective, we simply place two vanishing points on the horizon line. Keep in mind that the vanishing points might extend beyond the picture plane. To draw an object in two-point perspective, place the front edge of the object as a vertical line, either below or above the horizon line. The vertical line can also intersect the horizon line. In the image below, we see examples of all three. After drawing the vertical line depicting the front edge, extend the orthogonal lines from each end of the vertical line to the vanishing points. Draw vertical lines to the left and right of the front edge. These lines establish the height and width of the sides of the object. If we're drawing objects using a worm's eye view or bird's eye view, where the top or bottom plane of the object is visible, extend orthogonal lines from the top or bottom corner of these lines to the opposite vanishing point. From here to the opposite vanishing point, and from here to the opposite vanishing point. Where these lines intersect marks the back corner of the object. Here we see an image of a building in two-point perspective. Note that the orthogonal lines recede to vanishing points beyond the picture's edges. Perspective in still life drawing and painting. Sometimes a still life painting may include objects such as books or the tabletop on which the setup is placed. These are rectilinear objects that need to be drawn accurately depending on your point of view. In these instances, we will use the basic principles of linear perspective. If you're looking at your object straight on, you will generally be working with one-point perspective. In this example, the orthogonal lines of all the boxes converge on a single vanishing point. As you can see, the point of view of the artist is slightly elevated. Consequently, the horizon line on which the vanishing point sits will be at the top edge of the painting or slightly beyond it. Here we see the same painting with the blue lines indicating several of the orthogonal lines of the boxes. These lines converge on a single vanishing point at the top edge of the painting. However, if your still life contains a series of rectilinear objects that are angled in different directions, you will need to use two-point perspective. In this image, we see examples of both one-point perspective and two-point perspective. As we can see, the box at the top is facing us directly. This is an example of one-point perspective. The top edges of the box moving away from us are orthogonal lines converging on a single vanishing point that is placed on the horizon line beyond the picture's edge. These are shown in red. Remember that the horizon line establishes our eye level, which makes sense here because we're looking at these objects from a slightly elevated point of view. The box underneath and the books are in two-point perspective. Using the box as our example, we can begin by establishing the vertical front edge and two of the angles. We can then establish the width and depth of the object by drawing the verticals that are farthest away. These are shown in blue. Finally, once you have these sorted out, the other angles will be more or less parallel since the vanishing points are far beyond the picture's edges. Remember that to establish the back edges, you will extend the orthogonal lines from the back corner to the opposite vanishing point. These are shown in yellow. We can do the same for the rest of the objects. Keep in mind that all of this should be done lightly using the blocking technique, and especially the seeing through aspect of the blocking technique. Here we see an example of a couple of books drawn in two-point perspective using the blocking and the seeing through technique. Finally, let's talk about foreshortening. The glass on the left is in foreshortened perspective, meaning that it's at an extreme angle to our point of view. This can be a challenge, but with a little practice we can get the hang of it. The main thing you want to do is establish a straight line that runs down the center of the glass. Imagine a line running right down the center, and here we'll have to establish that angle. And that will be our guidepost. Around that line, we create a series of circles or ellipses, and they should be centered. Let's imagine a point at the end of the line that should be centered right in the middle of that circle. The same is true with the other circles. As we move our way down, we have the top edge, the rim of the glass, and then the bottom, which is a little bigger because the glass is tapered, as you can see. We move our way down to the stem, which in this case we see a series of concentric circles again until we get to the base of the glass. And again, this should be centered around that line. Once we have that established, we make our connections and fill in our details.